Keeping them honest every night. AC360. CNN. Weeknights 10 Eastern.
We begin tonight keeping them honest with America's first birther bill. Arizona lawmakers passed it. The bill's sponsor freely admits he has doubts about President Obama's citizenship. And Donald Trump, who's perhaps the loudest voice right now on the birther bandwagon, well, he was talking loudly again tonight.
He should provide his birth certificate, and he should do it soon. Because say what you want, I am getting more calls and more letters and more support. Look at my polls. They're through the roof.
Trump, by the way, has acquainted himself with the sponsor of this new bill in Arizona, and you'll hear from him plenty from both men in a moment. First, though, the bill itself. Barring a veto by Governor Jan Brewer, it takes effect in time for the 2012 presidential campaign. That said, well, listen to the incumbent. He doesn't sound very worried.
I was born in Hawaii. But I became a man here in Chicago.
In fact, in this interview last night with ABC's George Stephanopoulos, Mr. Obama sounded distinctly like someone trying to turn the birther issue to his advantage.
Over the last 2.5 years, there's been an effort to go at me in a way that is politically expedient in the short term for Republicans, but creates, I think, a problem for them when they want to actually run in a general election where most people feel pretty confident. The president was born where he says he was, in Hawaii. He doesn't have horns.
So in that general election, this new Arizona law would require a presidential candidate to submit a certified copy of a long-form birth certificate. That includes at least the date and place of birth, as well as the names of the hospital and the doctor in attendance. Now, before going any further, we want to show you something right here. President Obama's birth certificate. That's the official Hawaii document. It's called a certificate of live birth. Other states call them certificates of birth or birth certificates. The original is on file in Honolulu. Hawaii's current Democratic governor, and this is important, the state's former Republican governor, well, they both vouch for that document. It's good enough for them, good enough for the State Department to issue the president a passport. It's the only kind of birth certificate copy they give out in Hawaii. But because it lacks the doctor and the hospital names, it appears not to be good enough under Arizona's new law. Again, the law would be in effect next year, but supporters say it's not about Barack Obama. That's exactly what they said about a similar bill that failed to pass Arizona last year. Anderson spoke back then with State Representative Cecil Ash, and at the beginning of the interview, Ash said he believed the president was in fact born in Hawaii, but listen, he quickly got more and more doubtful.
So why vote for something which perpetuates these false internet rumors?
Well, Anderson, I think there's been a lot of controversy over the issue. It's created a division among a lot of people in the United States, and for better or worse, many people don't believe he's a U.S. citizen. They believe he has loyalties, divided loyalties, I suppose you could say.
Right, but those people are wrong. I mean, he is a U.S. citizen.
Well, you're telling me that he's wrong. I've never investigated that. If he is, then he has nothing to fear.
But I mean, that's, the information is out there. I mean, it has been released. It has been shown. There are some people who don't believe it, but there are also some people who believe that the moon is made out of cheese. And you can say you've never investigated it, but I think you would probably say the moon is not made out of cheese.
Well, I certainly would, but the reason I spoke up on this bill is simply because there is a lot of division in the country, and I believe this would put an end to any future controversy about a president's qualifications.
You told our producer you voted for this because you get a lot of calls from constituents with questions based on things they've read on the internet. I mean, isn't it your job as a leader to actually lead, to not just throw up your hands and say, well, who knows what's real and not on the internet, to actually say, well, actually, you know, Hawaii has released this information and it's factually correct?
Well, as I said, I haven't personally investigated that, but I think that if...
But I mean, there's plenty of things you believe that you have not personally investigated. Why this are you holding on to?
What we're requiring here is for a presidential candidate to demonstrate that he's qualified. And I don't think having any presidential candidate show that he's qualified by demonstrating the requirements of the requirements that there's any problem with that.
You told my producer you thought the president spent $1 million fighting the release of his birth certificate, and then that raised concerns for you.
That's what I've heard. As I said,
but that's not. You know, that's actually not true.
I don't know that that's not true. As I said, I haven't studied it. You get a lot of information on the internet. As you know, much of it is inaccurate. This has not been a focus of my attention for the last 2 years, but I know it is a matter of controversy for many people, and I looked at this as simply a means to end that controversy.
You also said to our producer that the president identified himself as a foreigner on his college application.
Yes.
You know that's not true, right?
I didn't know that that was not true.
Okay. That's a story that was put out on April Fool's Day. It's a fake AP news story.
Like I said, I'm reluctant to believe anything I read on the internet, including the evidence about his birth certificate.